Okay, well, welcome everybody to the Traditional Mediterranean Lifestyle webinar entitled From Hippocrates to Infinity, organized by the Mediterranean Lifestyle Medicine Institute. Now, a very warm welcome to over, we think, 260 registered participants from maybe around 10 countries. So it's a fantastic way to turn up. Thank you very much. And it's a great sense of spirit of togetherness. Now, 25 centuries ago, Hippocrates emphasized a holistic approach to medicine, warning doctors not to neglect anybody's systems when examining a sick person. All lifestyle factors were to be considered when treating disease symptoms. And the advice or treatment should focus not only on alleviating the symptoms, but achieving total well-being. The newly formed Mediterranean Lifestyle Medicine Institute's webinar, this one, the Traditional Mediterranean Lifestyle from Hippocrates to Infinity, will introduce the concept of the Mediterranean lifestyle as a healthy way of living, a healthy lifestyle, that can lead to total well-being. Now, experts and leaders of the largest lifestyle medicine organizations worldwide will deliver short presentations in the context of the 6 pillars of lifestyle medicine. And then some of the presenters will be available live here in Leros towards the end of the webinar for the Q&A session. So it's important to ensure that you understand that questions must be posted as instructed on the website, on the YouTube site. You can email the questions and they can also come through the chat, I understand. It's controlled by Athens, which is a couple of 100 miles away, just around the corner. So everything should be fine as long as here in Leros we continue to have connectivity, which I'm sure we will. This is being recorded and it will be available almost immediately after the end of the presentations. There'll be 12 short presentations and a 3-minute video of Leros about halfway through or so. So don't forget to put in the questions. It's very important. We want you to engage. And please put comments in as well, where you may be working, where you're based in the world, what your job is, and your area of health or otherwise, what you're most invested in. We really want to know. So to start off on our webinar, I'm going to have to introduce the founder of the Mediterranean Lifestyle Medicine Institute, Professor Leros, who last night was the star attraction in the inauguration of the Institute, in the presence of the mayor of this island and also the member of parliament for the whole of the Dedekinese area. So it was a wonderful event, and it was all, it's something that of which he should be very proud. And he's going to give us a little introduction now into the Mediterranean Lifestyle Medicine Institute. So over to Professor Sidosis now.
Hello, and welcome to our webinar. This is the first webinar organized by the Mediterranean Lifestyle Medicine Institute. We established this institute earlier this year for 2 reasons. One, to research the connection between the Mediterranean lifestyle and health. And the second, to disseminate those findings. And of course, the findings of many other brilliant colleagues that work in this area, to the health experts, but also the general population. Both tasks are challenging, we know that, but we are determined to work towards achieving these goals as much as we can. We have been joined in this effort by some of the most distinguished experts and leaders of the largest lifestyle medicine organizations worldwide. Most of them will be delivering short lectures today in an effort to introduce the concept of the Mediterranean lifestyle and how it can affect our health, longevity, and well-being. The headquarters of our institute are in the small island of Leros, in the heart of the Mediterranean region. In fact, in my background, you see one of the white islands. These are small rocks in the middle of the Aegean Sea, right next to Leros Island. Spectacular beauty, and I hope you sometime get the chance to experience the feeling of being there and swimming in those waters. We chose Leros because it represents the traditional Mediterranean landscape, where the blessing or the curse of tourism has not permanently altered the essence of the lifestyle of the people living on this island. And also, the visitors that come here can experience this traditional lifestyle. I would like to thank you all for attending this webinar, and I would like to invite you to review our webpage, learn more about our mission and our goals, and perhaps if you find those goals interesting, join us in this effort. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you very much, Labros. It's been a really honor and privilege to be on the premises and seeing the office here, and it's got a great future, I'm sure. So now I'd like to introduce Professor George Krousos, who is Professor of Pediatrics and Endocrinology. He's emeritus and the holder of UNESCO Chair on Adolescent Healthcare. He's the director of the University Research Institute of Maternal and Child Health and Precision Medicine, the University of Athens Medical School, and his title is Managing Stress the Mediterranean Way.
We are in the beautiful island of Leros in the Aegean Sea, very close to the island of Kos, where Hippocrates studied and practiced medicine. Hippocrates divided medicine into three branches. Number one, physics. By that he meant internal medicine and pediatrics. Surgery and dietetics. In ancient Greek, dietetics meant the science of the way of life. Nowadays, we call dietetics lifestyle, and dietetics as a science or medicine, lifestyle medicine. Now, in lifestyle medicine, there are 5 things that are absolutely necessary to generate and maintain health. Number one, proper nutrition. The Mediterranean diet, and by that we mean actually the diet of the island of Crete and most of the rest of Greece. Number two, exercise, moderate exercise. Number three, sleep, good regular sleep. Number four, regularity of meals and sleep. And number five, stress management. I've been working for many years in the area of stress, and it's important to know that what we call chronic stress is quite damaging to our mind and to our body. What chronic stress does is that it generates and makes worse the so-called chronic non-communicable disorders. These chronic non-communicable disorders are the diseases that in modern societies kill us. And what are they? Number one, they are psychological, namely anxiety and depression. Number two, they're somatic, starting with obesity. Obesity is actually a chronic disease and a product, to some extent, of chronic stress. Obesity is accompanied by many other disorders. It's called comorbidity, including carbohydrate intolerance or insulin resistance, which can result in diabetes mellitus type 2. Number two, dyslipidemia. Number three, hypertension. Number four, sleep apnea. Number five, polycystic ovary disease, and so on and so on. Also, in the chronic non-communicable disorders, we must include cancer and Interestingly, obesity that I mentioned before is associated with increased incidence of cancer, various cancers. And so is chronic stress, by the way. We are particularly prone to certain cancers if we're chronically stressed. I will just mention colon cancer and breast cancer, very, very common cancers that have increased incidence in people who are chronically stressed or are obese. We don't think of it, but chronic stress also makes us more prone to develop certain infectious disorders. I'll give you an example. Who were the most vulnerable now during the COVID-19 pandemic? They were the people who had chronic diseases, starting with obesity. Obesity increased the vulnerability of people to develop severe, all the way to fatal COVID-19 disease. Therefore, in conclusion, Mediterranean lifestyle includes what I mentioned before, the 5 basic pillars of health. And on top, the good environment, the presence of good ambient temperature, the presence of a social life, the opportunity to communicate with various people and to establish good relationships. This is very important. And generally, to help us live a long and healthful life. Let me just mention that there are 5 blue zones on Earth. They're called so because in them we find the highest incidence of centenarians. One of them is in Greece, and actually it's in the Aegean Sea, the island of Icaria, which is not far from here. The other locations are in Okinawa, Japan, Palo Alto, California, Sardinia, also Mediterranean Sea, as well as Costa Rica. All of these areas that are conducive to good and healthy life are areas in which people live a pleasant, non-stressful life. They have a good diet, they exercise, and they have good relationships around them, which are quite supportive in everything that happens to them, good or bad. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much indeed, Professor Chrousos. It's very important, isn't it, in the COVID-19 world to make associations, and you've made that very well. I think we all need to have less stressful lives. There's no question about that. And I'd like to introduce Dr. Sam Manger, who is a family doctor in Australia, and he's the chair of the president of the Australian Lifestyle Medicine Institute, and of course he's a vice president of the Mediterranean Lifestyle Medicine Institute. And his title is Managing Sleep Using Principles of Lifestyle Medicine. So welcome, Sam.
Hello, everyone. My name is Dr. Sam Manger. Thank you for joining me for this talk. I'm a GP. I run the Master's and Graduate Diploma in Lifestyle Medicine at James Cook University and also a lecturer in general practice. I'm president of the Australian Society of Lifestyle Medicine, and I have a podcast for health professionals if you'd like to check it out. Today, I'm talking about managing sleep using principles of lifestyle medicine within the Mediterranean lifestyle context. So just a few things. I'm not being paid or incentivized to do this talk by either the Mediterranean Lifestyle Medicine Institute or as president of the Australian Society of Lifestyle Medicine. I do these things, as I say, for love, not money. So sleep in the Mediterranean lifestyle, there's a sort of common pattern you see. Adequate forms of rest at night makes sense. That's just human nature. And then short daytime naps, as many of us will know them as called the siesta, often after sort of lunch, early afternoon lunch. Now, when it comes to the nighttime sleep, a lot of us know some of the basics here. Too little sleep obviously not good for sleep deprivation, linked with a number of causes of morbidity and mortality. What less people know is that there's actually mounting and has been evidence for some time that too much sleep is also detrimental to our health and well-being, in particular around cardiovascular disease. But then we move into the siesta and the nap. And it's tricky because there's some research that says they're very good for you, and some research says they're actually not very good for you. And it's hard to tease that apart. So let's just try a little bit. There's research that suggests that it actually reduces systemic inflammation. There is a question mark around, or is it because you're offsetting the inflammatory effects of sleep deprivation? It seems to be leaning that just a nap and siesta can be good for you, full stop. Improves cognitive functions, physical performance and psychological states in athletes, and there's been actually quite a lot of high-level research on that in particular. Reduce coronary events and blood pressure, and protective against obesity. When you look at the detrimental research, I suppose, around siestas and naps, what you commonly see across those studies is that it's the amount. Over an hour, in some studies over 90 minutes in athletes in particular, over an hour seems to lead to pathological effects. So increased risk of type 2 diabetes across different populations, psychiatric disorders, substance use. Obviously, the longer you sleep during the day, the more it will impact, and we know that, your sleep quality at night and affect the sleep cycle and your ability to go through those sleep cycles physiologically, and then respiratory problems in younger people. So there's obviously still a bit to be worked out there. And it's not so simple. Whether it's good or bad for you depends on a number of factors. For example, those who commonly or regularly take a siesta as a part of their cultural heritage, as it were, it looks that actually 65% of those, or at least taking a siesta, may be 65% genetic. So is it that it's cultural, or is it that it's genetic? Complexity of sleep systemic physiology, and I'll go through that in the next slide. It's very complex, and hence whether siesta is good or bad may depend on the variety of systems with which it affects. The personalization required, whether that's biopsychosocial cultural, aka the lifestyle one lives, the job one has, shift work, for example, athletics, maybe there is a very good role for a siesta in certain roles. Is it objectively healthy, or is it more that siestas and naps are good in response to a pathology, aka like an insomnia disorder or a sleep deprivation disorder? Is it a duration? I pointed at before that it very much looks like duration matters a lot. Over an hour or over 90 minutes in athletes increases the risk of cardiovascular disease and metabolic disorders and mortality, compared to shorter duration infrequent siestas, so less than 40 minutes before 3 p.m. Doesn't affect that sleep cycle, doesn't cause the pathological effects, seems to lean towards the beneficial effects. And this is all trickied and murky, because some of the research here is not so clear, because just the nature of the research is lower methodological quality, like cross-sectional studies. And the complex physiology of sleep is fascinating. I'd love to give a whole hour talk on this alone, because it's far more. Many of us will know about the master clock, the supraplasmic nucleus and the hypothalamus that drive circadian rhythm. Less people are aware that the circadian rhythm is actually an intrinsic property of single cells themselves. And so optimal function requires synchrony between the behaviors that we live and the environments and the cues from our environment, aka the sun and the light and the dark cycles. So we know that these single cell properties of circadian rhythm, it organizes things like metabolism, digestion, absorption of food, energy expenditure and glucose levels, hormone production like cortisol, ACTH, immune function, inflammatory cascades like cytokine pathways, and even skin functions like water levels and blood flows. So whether a nap is good or bad is impacting in the system depends on what we've still got to learn about the impact of sleep and its profound effect, and we are still learning. And then, of course, like I said, the biopsychosocial cultural personalization that must occur. So what about the impact, the sleep management or sleep interventions? Obviously, I'm talking about lifestyle here, so I'm not talking about medication and a few other areas there. I'm talking about things that people can do within their lives that are non-pharmacological. There are a number of studies here, but I've just picked one from 2019 because it's a good study. It's a meta-analysis of randomized control trials where they looked at the effect of non-pharmacological sleep interventions on depression symptoms. And that's important because depression obviously is important for our mental well-being, but has markers of neuroinflammation, other aspects of systemic inflammation. In studies, and the quote from here is, in studies of participants with mental health problems, sleep interventions had a large effect on depression symptoms. That Cohen's d is 0.81. That's a large effect. This is split between a small effect, 0.3, a moderate effect, 0.5, and a large effect, 0.8. To put that in context, medications, antidepressants for depression have an effect size on average of about 0.35, some up to 0.5. And that's really for moderate to severe depression only. So when we think about what are these lifestyle management options, we've obviously got the food, we've got the fluids that we drink, we've got the movement that we have, we've got our social connection, social support. And we've also got sleep hygiene, stimulus control. And sadly, I can't go through every element of that. Pre-sleep routines, and there's actually quite a bit of evidence for these different aspects. Relaxation, visualization, even warm showers or warm bath. There have actually been systematic reviews on that. Music before bed and gratitude diarying. There are trials in all of these things showing that it can improve sleep quality and duration. And then cognitive behavioral therapy for insomnia is really the gold standard treatment for insomnia. And there are good evidence now showing that digital pathways are as effective as face-to-face. And with the advent of more and more digital options here, that's really liberating. And then we get into the fine detail, which should really be done by a therapist, bedtime restriction therapy. Apologies for the ding there in the background. When we look at the lifestyle changes, obviously a healthy diet, there's actually quite a bit of evidence that a healthy diet, aka a Mediterranean diet, is important for our sleep. Fish, fruit, vegetables, whole grains, things like legumes, lentils, chickpeas, etc., show sleep promoting effects. However, on the opposite, the standard American or Australian diet, the SAD diet, there's less fiber, more saturated fat, and more sugar throughout the day is linked with lighter, less restorative sleep. So it really does make that impact. We also know that these foods can be pro-inflammatory if they are less fiber, sugar, more saturated fats, and then the Mediterranean diet, which is anti-inflammatory. We can see that a heavy meal soon just before bed can also interrupt sleep quality, and social meals seem to be beneficial. Alcohol, which is a common thing that many people will use to help them fall asleep quicker, which it can do, increases sleep fragmentation though and reduces the quality of that sleep, and obviously lead to other problems like sleep apnea. And then good old caffeine. You know, the way caffeine works is it blocks the adenosine signals. The adenosine accumulating through the day is what creates that sleep drive, the push for sleep. Caffeine blocks that. So it makes sense with a half-life of 5 to 6 hours that you want as little of that in your system when you're trying to get to bed. So none within 6 hours. And then finally, I'll just point to exercise. There's moderate intensity exercise throughout your day increases your deep sleep amount, and it's obviously very good for your mood. There's quite a lot of evidence now, meta-analyses showing that it is as effective as antidepressants and psychotherapy in the management of depression and anxiety. So obviously that's not true for everyone. Some people should, the doing exercise before bed, it seems to be a personalized result or a bit of a bell curve there. Some people tolerate it just fine. Some people do not. It wakes them up, it elates them, as it were, and it will affect their sleep. So that's a personalized factor up to clinicians. All right, so that's my quick little brief on lifestyle management in sleep and context of the Mediterranean lifestyle. Thank you very much for listening, and restful sleeping.
Well, thank you very much indeed, Sam. It's lovely to hear from you. Just for your information, because I know you don't know very much, hora sexta, that's where the word siesta came from, the 6 hour from dawn. So I'm sure your life is more complete now that you know that. The circadian rhythm is so important too, isn't it? Now I'm going to move on. I've got to introduce myself. So I'm the chair of the British Society of Lifestyle Medicine, as well as being the vice president, a vice president of the Med LMI, and also president of the European Lifestyle Medicine Council. Both organizations, of course, fully support the MLMI. And my brief is social relationships. So on to that. Thank you for me.
Well, hello everyone from Leros, Greece. My name is Rob Lawson. I'm a vice president of the Institute and also chair of the British Society of Lifestyle Medicine. And I have no conflict of interest to declare. So let's begin. Just to be serious about levity, here is a Mare Nostrum, big enough to fit inside Australia. And according to this map, at Leros, we're parked just off the coast of central Queensland. Confused? You soon won't be. The Mediterranean is a complex combination of ideas, feelings, imageries, cultures, ways of life, all of which have been cultivated for centuries and still cultivated in this sea amongst lands. The Mediterranean lifestyle is about light and colors, flavors and scents, eras and trends, history and daily life, ideas and ideals, but above all, culture and cultures, the meeting point of 3 continents. So turning now to the subject matter, what defines healthy relationships? Healthy relationships describe the quality and the number of relationships we have in our lives. If we have healthy relationships, we'll be less socially isolated and less likely to experience loneliness. So firstly, social isolation, and this describes a lack of social contact or support. On the other hand, loneliness describes the feeling of being alone or isolated or alienated, even in the presence of social contact. Secondly, social integration describes the overall level of involvement with both informal social relationships, for example, with husband, wife, or friends, and also with formal social relationships, for example, societies, religious institutions, or volunteer groups. Thirdly, quality of relationships describes the positive and negative aspects of a relationship. So positive aspects such as emotional support provided by people's friends and relatives, and negative aspects such as conflicted or abusive relationships. Fourthly, social networks, meaning the network of social relationships around a person, including the type and strength of relationship. Good quality social relationships, which often have been measured by a lack of social isolation or perceived isolation or loneliness, has been associated with many positive health outcomes. Firstly, relationships and mortality. A study in 2013 found that social isolation was a bigger risk factor for premature mortality than obesity and smoking combined. Secondly, relationships and the immune system. A study on medical students illustrated one of the ways social connection has been found to mitigate against the effects of stress on the immune system. Mental health and well-being. Children who scored highly for perceived isolation during COVID-19 were found to have lower well-being and poorer mental health. Fourthly, risk of dementia. The English longitudinal study of aging cohort demonstrated that increased isolation was significantly associated with reduction in cognitive function. Fifthly, sleep, which is a hugely underrated risk factor for non-communicable diseases. And finally, cardiovascular disease risk. The study of Swedish men found that low social support and low social integration were predictive of coronary morbidity. So, where 100 is the new 80. Surely a healthy lifespan has to be our holy grail. And some communities around the world, and especially in the Med, are getting closer. Italy, Spain, and France all figure in this slide. Well, Uruguay is a bit of a surprise. I mention healthy lifespan because, as we see here, in spite of some improvements on longevity, there is still a substantial difference in terms of healthy life years. The NCDs are going to overwhelm us and may already be overwhelming our health services if we do not all embrace lifestyle as medicine as the antidote. You'll see Greece is ranked 19, Cyprus 31, with Italy topping the Met table at number 6. So, what is the certain je ne sais quoi of Med lifestyle which leads to healthy longevity? Can I suggest that conviviality is the magic ingredient? Conviviality is a term with age-old roots and which perhaps encapsulates most succinctly the spirit of the Mediterranean way of life and of the peoples who have lived in this region from ancient times to the present day. In general terms, sharing, living together represents one of the most characteristic aspects of daily life of millions of people who spend their lives around the shores of the Mediterranean Sea. There are many settings for daily life, which can be traced back to this particular sociological trait of the Mediterranean peoples. Roads, the square, the marketplace, houses of worship, taverns, and cafes are all central elements in Mediterranean culture. Physical places for meeting and exchange, not only between individuals, but also of ideas, culture, and ways of living and thinking. So let's take a trip down memory lane and look at the ancient and compare with the modern, and bear in mind the concept of social prescribing in the modern day as an important lifestyle medicine tool. In ancient Greece, the agora was a center of daily life. Here, people would work, trade goods, meet friends, and conduct business deals. In modern times, we have shopping malls, surely a pale imitation of what we know as our high streets, and recently decimated by the coronavirus epidemic. Turning to food for a moment, from the modern marketplace and onwards to the essential part of med living, a way of sharing food and all the traditions and rituals that go with it. And I like this quote from Igor de Garin. What is confirmed in my view is the existence of a Mediterranean model, which conceived in its totality excludes anxiety and a sense of guilt and rehabilitates a way of eating that is innocent, joyous, and impregnated with authentic culture. The essence of the med lifestyle can also be seen in finding the right balance between work and free time. So why not have a dance? Plato thought it was a gift of the gods, and clearly had never seen me dancing. The theatre of ancient Greece flourished between 550 and 220 BC. Indeed, Western theatre has its roots in the theatre of ancient Greece and the plays that originated there. Apart from the fact that modern theatre seats are built for slimmer folk than currently occupy them, theatre is still a very popular social opportunity. Whatever your religion or none, temples and churches have been important places for common activities. This temple here is that of Diana in Ephesus. Unlike temples, churches were much more of meeting places, but we do know that faith plays an important part of healthy relationships and longevity. The Roman circus became the Greek hippodrome, designed for horse racing and chariot racing. And today, horse racing is immensely popular with great social gatherings, interesting headwear, and conviviality. Different kinds of races also attract social gatherings, and as you see, clothes and speed of running have developed somewhat over the years. On the islands, it is simply being on the move, being active, often together, which is a health giver. Yes, there really is a med gardening society, and here is a Cyprus branch, no pun intended. Gardening, including growing your own food, is a great social talking point and is increasingly being prescribed by doctors in the UK. So just to summarize, although in this short presentation I've not provided the science, we know that healthy relationships and lack of social isolation improve health outcomes, and that healthy relationships are a stronger risk factor for premature death than smoking and obesity combined. We haven't talked about this, but purpose in life is absolutely critical to healthy longevity. And here's another quote, this time from Socrates, who may have stalked these med shores before he died of hemlock poisoning at the age of 70. To finish off, a reminder, one of the blue zones is a few kilometers away from Leros. Ikaria is famously known as a place where people forget to die. Residents on the now famous Greek island enjoy exceptional longevity, on average 10 years longer and better than the rest of Europe and America. So one of the secrets to long life, well-managed stress and a relaxed pace of life. Let's call it conviviality, the Mediterranean lifestyle. So why don't we meet up again, not just this summer, but next summer, and we can all live the life together. Efharisto Poli. Thank you.
Well, we're going to move straight on from the conviviality, so important in med lifestyle, to a good friend who's arrived in Leros, Professor Catherine Etsiopoulos, Executive Dean, Health and Biomedicine, and Professor of Dietetics at RMIT University in Australia. And she's also a Vice President of the MLMI, and her title, Mediterranean Diet and Health and Longevity Using the MLM Approaches. So thank you, Catherine.
Hi, my name is Professor Catherine Etsiopoulos, and I'm the Executive Dean of Health and Biomedicine at RMIT University in Australia. I'm here today as the Vice President of the Mediterranean Lifestyle Medicine Institute. I'm the Australian daughter of Greek migrants, and I've dedicated my career to examining the therapeutic benefits of the traditional Greek Mediterranean diet. Now, I'd like to talk a little bit about what the Mediterranean diet is, and it would be remiss of me without mentioning the father of medicine, Hippocrates, who said in 350 BC, our food should be our medicine and our medicine should be our food. And interestingly, the island of Kos is not that far from here, was where Hippocrates is from, and he built the first hospital on record called the Asclepion, where I'm sure he talked about the Mediterranean diet and the therapeutic benefits. So the Mediterranean diet has received a lot of publicity, but also a lot of very good science. And in 2013, it was inscribed on the representative list of intangible cultural heritage of humanity by UNESCO. And there are a number of countries there reflected who were participants here of the Mediterranean diet. And we know the Mediterranean diet is enjoyed across the Mediterranean region, across the Mediterranean Sea, and there'll be about 30 countries which have a Mediterranean diet. But today we are in Greece. This collection of Mediterranean diet lifestyle factors are illustrated there on the slide, and we can see it's not just about the food, it's about the set of skills and knowledge and rituals and symbols. It's about the way you procure food and the way you preserve food, how you cook it, and how you share it together. And that's critically important. That sharing food together, connectedness is very important for Mediterranean diet lifestyle. The enablingness, the hospitality, the festivals are all part of this Mediterranean lifestyle. And an important factor which I'd like to mention is that women play a very important role in transmitting that knowledge of the traditional diet. So it goes from grandmother to daughter to granddaughter, and so on and so forth. Now, I was lucky enough to do some research and visit the island of Ikaria, which is in the Kyklades in Greece, and it is one of the blue zones. And the blue zones are labelled as such because they are regions of the world, and there are 5 there listed on that world map where people live a very long time. And the Icarians that I interviewed, I asked them a series of questions about what keeps you living long. And these were their answers. Firstly, they said that we don't have any stress. We're constantly happy and we're very positive, a very positive outlook on life. Generally don't smoke, but I did find some men that did smoke. And my message to them was, imagine how long you would live if you didn't smoke. Active social life and being productive. Now, this is part of being very active socially, but sexually as well. So that is very much part of that longevity. And being productive, doing something. The family coherence, eating together, lots of festivals. In fact, 100 festivals on this island each year, and everybody's invited. The whole island's invited. I attended a wedding. I didn't know the couple, but everyone was invited, and there were 2,000 people at this wedding. Physically active, walking everywhere, keeping a home garden. It's very mountainous. Everybody walks. The roads are not that easy for cars to navigate, so people do walk a lot, and that keeps them fit, and it's mountainous, as I mentioned, and lots of people have home garden and they prefer homegrown food. Now, that positivity that I mentioned, I interviewed Maria. She was 107 and she would be over 110 now. And she sang and she was very active, and she actually produced all these bags. So keeping the brain active was really, really important. High plant food diet focused on locally grown fresh foods. Free-range food produce, so not just plant foods, some animal foods. You can see a goat there, free-ranging goat. They roam free. They feed on herbs, natural herbs, which means that they're consuming a diet that's rich in these phytonutrients, which in turn ensures that their meat is very healthy. And one of my professors, Professor Kieran O'Day, always referred to these free-ranging goats on the islands of Greece as marinating on the bone, and that's an image that has stayed with me for all these years. Most important, having purpose in life. Let's track now to Australia, where Antonia Thurvis, who is a PhD graduate of mine. She's a dietitian, and she was completed the Australian MEDIS study as part of her PhD. And we collaborated with MEDIS researchers and Demosthenis Panagiotakos and Evangelos Polychronopoulos here in Greece. And so we did the Australian arm, and Antonia completed her PhD. And what she found was that this was in first-generation Greek migrants who've been in Australia for over 60 years. 75% of them kept a home garden, and they grew all of these lovely vegetables: onions, garlic, tomatoes, greens, herbs. They all had an olive tree. What we found, or what Tanya reported, was growing all these vegetables was associated with low blood pressure. So I guess what that signifies is that it is an association, and it's not a clinical trial, but it shows that possibly eating more vegetables, and particularly these types of vegetables, may have a positive impact, and garlic, we know a lot about that, and onions, a positive impact on blood pressure control. Wild edible greens, in another study that we did many years ago, the Horta had significantly higher levels of these phytonutrients, beta-carotene and lutein, compared to the common greens that you find in supermarkets like lettuce. Now, in summary, the benefits of growing your own food is that you're physically active, particularly weight-bearing exercise. You eat more plant foods because you must eat the very tasty foods that you grow. You get more sunshine, vitamin D, which is in turn good for your immunity and health. You share foods with your neighbours because you can't possibly eat all of those vegetables that you grow. You're socially active, of course, because you're sharing food, and you're growing sustainable, locally grown produce. And the picture here is of my daughter, and the other daughter is here with her hands cutting. We grew some beans in the backyard, and it's the backyard of my dear late mother. And my daughter converted that into a dish with pasta and lots of greens. So great to get the family involved in home gardens. Now, a little bit about the scientific evidence in support of this cardioprotective diet. And this is an extensive study. It's called an umbrella review of meta-analyses of multiple studies across the world involving approximately 13 million subjects. So what this research group did was they did this analysis and found that the association with the Mediterranean diet consumption was linked to reduction of deaths from all of these conditions. So for every 1 point increase in adherence to a Mediterranean diet, which was measured on a scale of 0 to 9, and this is a tool that was developed by Antonia Trichopoulou from Greece, where 0 means no adherence, you're not following any of those principles, 9 means you're fully following all the principles. So for every 1 point increase, there's a 10% reduction in mortality risk or deaths from all of these diseases. Now, how might the Mediterranean diet work? Well, we know these days that low-grade inflammation is linked to chronic disease, and it can happen in every cell of the body, as we see in this image. And what we know about the Mediterranean diet is it is rich in anti-inflammatory nutrients, which are mediating these effects of the low-grade inflammation. So in that way, preventing the onset of these chronic diseases, which are formed from low-grade inflammation. Now, a few slides on the toolkit. How do we implement this Mediterranean diet in our everyday life? And this is a Mediterranean diet pyramid, and it shows that conviviality, the eating together, the exercise at the bottom, the growing food, and then the food portions in different levels here, finishing up with sweets only a couple of times a week, and olive oil, olives, vegetables every single day, and beverages like water every day and wine in moderation. This is a 10 principles which you can use with patients or with yourself to implement the Mediterranean diet. It's something that we've developed through the studies that we've done in Australia over the years, and it's a semi-quantitative guide on how you can implement the Mediterranean diet in your everyday diet in every cuisine. So it doesn't have to be, I have to follow all of the recipes. You can use these principles to apply to the Mediterranean diet. The plant-to-animal ratio is important, so more 4 to 1 plant-to-animal ratio, 4 times as many plant foods to animal foods, just to get that rich plant-derived bioactive phytonutrients. A few slides from Leros, beautiful Leros with fishing boats here. Fishing is very much part of the Mediterranean diet. Eating at the tavernes with people, enjoying food, seaside, This is the plethora of seafoods available on the island, which are rich in omega-3 fatty acids. And in conclusion, this Mediterranean cuisine is highly palatable and sustainable and rich in anti-inflammatory cardioprotective nutrients, which is the perfect medicine for health and longevity. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much indeed, Catherine. That's what a wonderful exposition of Mediterranean life. It's not just about the food, and happiness measures highly in anybody's measuring. Now, I'd like to introduce Professor, is it Dr. Johannes Romian, MD, PhD. So it's Dr. Johannes Romian. He's Professor of Internal Medicine, Amsterdam University Medicine Center. Apologies, Hans, for getting this wrong. University of Amsterdam in the Netherlands. So he'll be talking about we are what we eat and the metabolism of eating.
Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for the invitation to give this presentation. And I'm sorry that I was not able to attend the current meeting. In the Bible, it is stated, we are made of dust, and to dust we will return. And in between, we will live, and we will compose our body, and we will do that by metabolism. We are what we eat. The main component of the nutrition are calories. However, we cannot assess precisely how much we should eat. This is exemplified in this painting by Titian of Bacchus in the 16th century. Several decades later, Bacchus was painted by Rubens, and he acquired excessive weight, as you can see. This must have been caused by discrepancy between calorie intake and calorie expenditure. We have a problem. We do not know how much calories we must eat every time, but our gut is not a caloric gatekeeper. All calories that we ingest are absorbed, and only a minute amount is lost by fecal excretion. Once absorbed, excessive calories are stored as endogenous triglycerides in the adipose tissue. Endogenous triglycerides can only be lost by oxidation. Oxidation is composed of two components, basal metabolism and additional metabolism induced by exercise. Here's the problem. If we do brisk walking, 95% of our calories are derived from plasma-free fatty acids, which are derived from adipose tissue. The triglycerides in adipose tissue are hydrolyzed and released as free fatty acids into the plasma, which can be subsequently oxidized. This was a study done by Professor Sidosis and me in 1993. The problem is related that we do not do that much exercise. Average adults in the Western society only walk 800 meters per day, which is in contrast to the recommendations, which are 2.5 to 3 kilometers per day. So we take in excessive calories, and we cannot lose them because we do not exercise. This will result in an increased mass of adipose tissue. This changes the phenotype of the person because adipose tissue is not just a passive store, but it's an active tissue which secretes many components into the blood which have active effects in distant organs, either direct or indirect through the brain and the autonomous nervous system. You are what you secrete by your adipose tissue. In addition, we do not know exactly what we eat. Every time we take a meal, it's a very crude estimation of what we should eat and how it is composed. The nutritional industry has taken advantage of this problem by changing the dietary fat to carbohydrate ratio in the past decades. So we consume much more fat nowadays in relation to the amount of carbohydrates than in the past. In addition, the sorts of fat in the diet are changed. These changes induce changes in our tissues. This can be exemplified in the meat of cows. This is an experiment in which they fed two groups of steers, two different nutritional regimens. And after 6 weeks, the meat was obtained, and it shows that there are major changes in the fatty acid composition of the beef. So, if you have different nutrition for different cows, you get a different cow. And if you consume these different meats, obviously, ultimately, this will also alter the tissue composition in humans, and this may result in pathophysiological changes. Well, these cows, they think, then you should eat more chicken. Well, here the problem is the same. If you feed chicken different nutritional regimens, you will get different meat composition of the chickens and different composition of the eggs. So the nutritional regimen of chickens and cows determines the composition of the meat of the chickens and the cows, and also determines the composition of the eggs and the milk. And if we consume these different chickens and cows, this will result, obviously, in different composition of our tissues as well. We should realize that some of these changes can be induced readily within a few weeks of changing the diet. Many experiments have been done in healthy volunteers, in patients with type 2 diabetes, in rodent models with Western high-fat diet compared to normal diet. Hypercaloric feeding of a Western high-fat diet results in obesity within a few weeks, both in animals and in humans. It also results within short notice in a modulation of insulin action in different tissues. Insulin resistance can be readily induced in the central nervous system, the liver, muscle, and adipose tissue. Insulin resistance is associated with type 2 diabetes mellitus, hypertension, and increased morbidity and mortality from cardiovascular diseases. So, the composition of her diet modulates the structure and function of her organs and results in increased pathophysiology and ultimately in increased morbidity and mortality. The Mediterranean diet has drawn much attention. In populations who adhere to a Mediterranean diet, there is no relation between hypertension and mortality from cardiovascular disease. In contrast to populations in Northern Europe and the United States, in which hypertension is clearly associated with an increase in coronary heart disease. Adherence to a Mediterranean diet is also associated with a significant reduction in total mortality. So we are what we eat. Nutrition is important. It alters pathophysiology of the human body, and ultimately it is associated with increased morbidity and mortality. And we thank the Mediterranean diet for giving us the inspiration and showing us the way in how we should eat. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much indeed, Hans. That was a fascinating presentation, and we look forward to seeing you a little later on. Next up, I'd like to introduce Dr. Stefania Ubaldi, President of the European Lifestyle Medicine Organization and also the Vice President of the Mediterranean Lifestyle Medicine Institute. And her talk is on alcohol and health, the Mediterranean way, another pillar.
The aim of this brief presentation is to raise awareness on the Mediterranean way of drinking alcohol and on its effects on health. Let's start with a quick reminder on the chemical structure of alcohol. It is an organic molecule made of carbons, oxygens, and hydrogen atoms, and when two carbons are present, then the alcohol is called ethanol. And this is the alcohol present in alcoholic beverages like wine, beer, or spirits. Ethanol has two carbons and an OH group, which is the part of the molecule which gives solubility in water to ethanol. The carbon chains are hydrophobic, but in the case of ethanol, they are too short and the OH dominates, and that's because of this, that ethanol has the ability to be distributed throughout the body and even to get to the brain, causing intoxication. This table, you can see the other types of alcohol with longer chains of carbons and not soluble in water. But let's come to the ongoing controversy, namely, is there an association between alcohol intake and health benefits? Even because the IARC, the International Agency for Research in Cancer of the WHO, has classified alcohol in group 1 carcinogen. So there's a controversy on this point and a big debate. And let's see if we can find the answer in the Mediterranean way of drinking. You probably all know this accepted interpretation of the G-shaped curve relating alcohol intake to mortality, which states that the lowest point in the curve, light to moderate drinking, represents optimum exposure to alcohol, and that the increased risk in non-drinkers reflects the consequence of suboptimum exposure. The authors found then that compared with abstinence from alcohol, low to moderate average consumption of alcohol is associated with a lower risk for CHD incidence and mortality, the lowest risk found at 20 grams of alcohol per day. The idea is that the ethanol, rather than a specific component of wine, beer, or spirits, appears to be the major factor in conferring the health benefits, and most studies show equal protection from all types of alcohol. However, red wine has been shown to have higher levels of bioflavonoids with antioxidant effects. Nevertheless, the developing consensus suggests that the specific alcoholic beverage is less important than the quantity and pattern of the alcohol intake. And now the same G-shaped curve has been redefined, taking into consideration the type of beverages. And as you can see, the curve for wine is the best for the relative risk. Now let's go to the Mediterranean way of drinking alcohol and to all the considerable amount of studies done on this relation between alcohol and health. Here is our Mediterranean diet pyramid. We know it very well, and we have wine in moderation in the pyramid, and that's why the Mediterranean way of drinking alcohol is defined as a specific pattern. Namely, it is low to moderate consumption of wine, defined as up to 2 glasses of wine per day for men and 1 for women, with meals, with food, and better if in conviviality. This pattern describes mainly wine intake, so let's have a look at the composition of wine. We know there is ethanol in wine, but not only. Wine is rich in phenols. One important phenolic compound in wine is resveratrol. Resveratrol is a stilbenyl phenol compound found in wine, producing the grape skins and leaves of grape wines. Resveratrol increases the expression level of CRT1 and has antioxidant, anti-inflammatory, and anti-carcinogenic properties. And although red wine and white wine varieties produce similar amounts of resveratrol, red wine contains more than white, since red wine are produced by maceration. And then we have anthocyanins, flavonoids. They are the source of the color of various fruits, such as red grapes. Here you can see the phenolic content of red and white wine, and the total polyphenol content is higher in red wine. Then let's go to studies, to the literature, and so many studies, recent but also older studies, which focus on the association between the Mediterranean way of drinking and health benefits. And this Mediterranean way of drinking, with the special pattern that we described, increases longevity, reduces the risk of cardiovascular disease, and has beneficial effects on hypertension, dyslipidemia, and dementia. Could even make the regression of plaque in carotid atherosclerosis in type 2 diabetes, and, very important, does not influence the overall risk of cancer. And the cardioprotective effect of red wine has been studied, and it has been attributed to the phenolic compounds present in red wines. The cardioprotective effect is related to the ability to prevent platelet aggregation and to modify the lipid profile and promote vasorelaxation. The phenolic content and profile seem to play an important role and in these beneficial effects. The inhibition of platelet aggregation is dose dependent, and the antioxidant capacity of phenolic compounds from red wine and its byproducts is involved in preventing the generation of free radicals and to prevent LDL oxidation. Moreover, specific phenolic compounds in red wine, like resveratrol, are related to promote NO and quercetin to inhibit platelet aggregation. Take-home messages. First, we have a considerable amount of literature that has been published claiming the cardiovascular benefits of moderate wine drinking. And this is considered a distinguished trait of the Mediterranean diet. This is the Mediterranean way of drinking. The ER classifies alcohol, not red wine, as a group 1 carcinogen associated with the development of cancers. And red wine contains various polyphenolic compounds, in particular flavonoids and the stilbene resveratrol. The cardioprotective effects of red wine could be explained by a synergic and additive effect of a mix of these phenolic compounds. And last but not least, alcohol's multiple effects on health not only depend on quantities, but also on pattern of the use of alcohol, whether intake is concentrated, such as during weekends, or regularly dispersed during meals. So in conclusion, could you prescribe alcohol to your patient for health benefits? I imagine here a prescription with the Cabernet Sauvignon. Well, probably not, because although there is extensive epidemiologic support for a light to moderate drinking pattern, a consensus has not been reached. But these consensus exist on the Mediterranean diet and health. And that's why probably the right prescription for our patient, based on the sustainable lifestyle model, would be this one: a Mediterranean diet and lifestyle rich in vitamins, in minerals, in antioxidants, which includes a Mediterranean way of drinking wine, the low to moderate wine consumption with food and with friends. Thank you for your attention.
Well, thank you very much indeed, Stefania. I think that I'm already looking forward to the next glass of red wine with good food and good friends, which is going to be later this evening. Now I'd like to introduce our video of Leros, which is about 3 minutes duration. And hopefully you'll get a taste of what a wonderful island this is and what a great example for the Mediterranean way of life. So here we go. Well, that was just to whet your appetite for your visit in 2023 to Leros. Lovely place. And I have to just reassure you that everybody in that film lives here. There are no actors or actresses, and no animals were hurt in the making of the video. So now we go on to our next presentation, which is from our founder, Professor Leros Island, professor at Rutgers University in New Jersey, and of course our president. And he's going to be talking about physical activity, the Mediterranean way.
Hello again, with a new background, this time the island of Leros. So the previous speakers discussed already several lifestyle factors and how they affect our health, and also how the Mediterranean lifestyle can help us improve those factors. I would like to spend the next few minutes discussing the concept of physical activity, which is one of the significant pillars of lifestyle medicine, and also what we can learn from the traditional Mediterranean lifestyle that might help us incorporate more physical activity into our daily lives. I will not waste any of your time discussing the health effects of physical activity and exercise. We all know that exercise is good for you. It prevents diseases such as diabetes, heart disease, hypertension, and even some forms of cancer. It helps us maintain a healthy weight. and also adds life to our years, improving the quality of our lives. Nevertheless, 2 out of 3 adults do not exercise enough during the day or during the week. In fact, the numbers are even worse for younger people. Why is this happening? Why are we not doing something that we all know very well, that it will help us live a long and healthy life? I don't claim that I have the answer. However, I would like to discuss an idea with you. Maybe the explanation is simpler than we think, and it relates to definitions. In other words, how we define exercise, how do we define physical activity. You may have noticed that I have been using those 2 terms, exercise and physical activity, interchangeably up to this point of my presentation. However, these terms are in fact very, very different. Physical activity is defined as any movement that is carried out by the muscles that requires energy. For example, going to the bathroom in the morning is physical activity. Walking to the bus stop, riding our bike to work, tending to our garden, carrying the groceries, washing dishes, dancing at the club, having sex with our partner. All of these are examples of physical activity. On the other hand, exercise is planned, structured, repetitive, and intentional physical activity. For example, going to the gym every day, to run for 30 minutes on the treadmill, and then do 5 sets of bicep curls, 10 repetitions per set. This is an example of physical activity, exercise. The main reason that we cannot stick with this type of physical activity, planned, structured, repetitive, and intentional, in other words, exercise, is because it's counterintuitive. After millions of years of hardship, our bodies think and behave in a survival mode. Our body thinks, why should I run on a treadmill for 30 minutes, burn all these valuable calories, and end up at the same exact spot without having achieved any of the primary means of survival, which are collecting food and finding a spouse to have babies. On top of that, exercise requires that we significantly change our lifestyle, adding one more thing to our busy everyday lives. For example, it requires you to rush from the office to the gym, do your workout, and then rush again to go to pick up the kids from daycare. This is not easy to add it to our lives every day. On the other hand, physical activity, as we discussed it above, makes perfect sense. Going to the bathroom is a biological need. Tending to my garden gives me food and pleasure. Carrying the groceries is essential if I want to eat. Dancing is fun, and having sex will continue the existence of humans, and it could also be fun. So what I'm proposing here is to change our mindset from setting goals like I want to improve my health through exercise to a gentler and stress-free approach. I want to be physically active. This is why I suggest that we should consider following the traditional Mediterranean-style physical activity model. In the old days, physical activity was part of daily living of the people in the Mediterranean region and elsewhere, of course. People had the opportunity or the need to walk to work, which involved some kind of manual labor, use the stairs, carry their groceries, dance and have fun during celebrations or festivities. They swam, walked, and even played for fun. Even though those conditions have changed significantly during the past few decades, People in the Mediterranean region still walk more and spend more time outdoors than people living in other areas of the Western world. Could this be one of the secrets of their longevity and good health up until later in life? Perhaps. So one might then ask, are these daily activities enough to contribute to good health? Don't we need to exercise hard to achieve good health? No pain, no gain. Well, the answers to these questions are yes and no. So yes, daily activities could be enough to contribute to good health. And no, we don't necessarily need to exercise to achieve good health. In the past, we thought that for good health, we needed to exercise for at least 30 to 60 minutes per day. However, recent evidence show very strongly that adding even 10 to 15 minutes of walking or any other type of physical activity per day on top of what we normally do is more than enough to improve our health. How do we achieve this modest goal? I think it's simple. Always use the stairs instead of the elevator or the escalator. And if you have time, use it twice. Just go back down, go up again a couple of times. Start a garden if you can. Walk to a colleague's office next door instead of calling him. Dance to your favorite music alone or with friends and company. And have more sex if you can. Of course, if you want to do more, then you might even get more benefits. If you like going to the gym, by all means, go there if you enjoy it. However, even though being physically active is very important for our health, it's not enough to gift us a healthy life. As the other speakers covered before, it's very important that we tend to all of those lifestyle factors. Following a healthy Mediterranean diet, getting adequate sleep, controlling stress and addictions, having a purpose in life, and maintaining meaningful relationships. All of these factors working in sync will provide the best chance to live a long and healthy life. Thank you very much for your attention.
Well, thank you very much, Leros Island. I think that the important points there clearly are that we have a holistic view on how we lead our lives and how we can pursue our health as we wish to pursue it. I'm about to introduce now the next speaker, Dr. Elias Bourgouris, who's a psychologist, I think in the States and also in Greece. He's an author and a speaker. And he'll be telling us about the Mediterranean lifestyle and, as we just heard, the pursuit of happiness. Well, technical problems do happen, so I apologize for that. But on the other hand, it's something we just have to deal with and move on in a happy kind of a way. So we'll come back to the happiness, I'm sure, if we can. So the next speaker will be Dr. Matthew Matsikanis, Associate Professor of Communication at Rutgers University in New Jersey. And his title is Intercultural Communication and Promoting a Mediterranean Lifestyle in the US and Greece.
Hello. Thank you to the organizers of this special event and the leadership of the Mediterranean Lifestyle Medicine Institute for the invitation to speak with you today. It's a great pleasure to be here. In the next few minutes, and based on an academic program that I co-led, I'm going to make a pitch to you to support and design interventions to promote, through intercultural communication, a Mediterranean diet and lifestyle, more broadly speaking, because of the benefits that many of our event speakers have eloquently highlighted or will do so right after me. My name is Matthew Mataganes. I'm an associate professor of communication at Rutgers University School of Communication and Information in New Jersey. And my research and teaching focuses on health communication and specifically on diagnosing how communication is implicated in the creation, but most importantly, in interventions to eliminate health and other social disparities and inequities. I'm also the co-lead of an initiative by Rutgers School of Communication and Information and Rutgers School of Health Professions to advance health communication across the health professions in Greece and in the US. As I transition to our next slide and move my camera a little bit here, there we go. So it's in this capacity that earlier this summer, colleagues from Rutgers and I, as well as colleagues from the Hellenic Mediterranean University, ran a summer school in Crete that focused on health communication and health inequalities across the health professions. We brought together budding health communication experts and professionals, but also nurses, mental health professionals, dietitians, lab scientists, and social workers from both the US and Greece. Among other things, during this summer school, we wanted to talk about how our individual nutrition behavior is shaped by the multiple contexts or environments, yes, plural, that we are simultaneously embedded in, and to discuss where we need to and where we can intervene to help people eat better and live healthier lives. In doing so, we adopted a sociological approach to health, which many of you here, I'm sure, are familiar with. Particularly in the context of the summer school, we talked about the natural environment that makes it possible or not, for example, to grow plenty of fresh fruits and vegetables of high quality. We talked about the community environment in which we live in and that may be devoid of grocery stores with good quality and affordable produce, making the place a food desert. And the particular social context of interpersonal relationships. There's a Greek saying that with a little bit of a twist is relevant here. The saying goes, show me who your friends are and I'll tell you who you are. When it comes to health and nutrition behavior in particular, we know that the behavior of our family members and friends and other close relationships can shape, and their behavior is shaped by our own eating habits. Having such a conversation in Crete seemed ideal to us. The Cretan diet offers a blueprint of sorts for anyone who wants to adopt a Mediterranean diet, and the diet is credited with as one of the key ingredients of a Mediterranean lifestyle that promises a better quality of life and, in fact, a longer life. In a class activity, especially we asked students, especially US students, to visit a supermarket in Iraklio in Crete and take note of anything that seemed different from what they knew of supermarkets back at home. We asked them to pay particular attention to fresh fruits and vegetable options and the cost of this produce, the availability of meat, dairy products, and eggs, among other things. We also asked students, both US-based students and Greek students, to reflect on their daily eating behavior before coming to class and to consider what this behavior depended on. They all came to class ready to share their reflections, notes, and thoughts. The conversation lasted at least twice as long as we expected, but we did not want to interrupt this very rich flow of dialogue, and it allowed us to touch on a variety of issues that account for nutrition behavior, inequalities in terms of access to food, and especially to better quality fresh fruits and vegetables. US students, for example, highlighted the better quality produce at the supermarkets they visited in Crete and a wider variety compared to what they were used to. They also noted that fresh produce was much more affordable, even accounting for differences in cost of life between the US and Greece. A couple of them, in fact, shared that this was the first time in their life that they looked forward to eating a salad, something they will look forward to doing again when they continue doing when they get back to the US. Although one of them said that tomatoes they could find in the US were more like water with texture. US students commented also on conversations that they had with their teammates, their Greek teammates, as students worked in interprofessional and cross-cultural teams to complete a major research project. In this conversation, several Greek students mentioned that it was common for them to sit down with others during the day to share a meal. So eating was for them also a social activity. That said, availability of good quality and, relatively speaking, affordable fresh produce and vegetables does not guarantee a healthier diet. Although a few Greek students, all of them who identified as female, mentioned that they did cook for themselves. Others pointed out that their eating practices did not really conform to the Mediterranean diet, largely because of their work schedules and lives, even though the natural and community environments that they lived in was conducive to doing so otherwise. Still, others said that their eating behavior was closer to the Mediterranean diet, ideal rather, thanks to or whenever they were able to get food from family members who lived nearby. The experience gave those of us particularly who came from a communication background pause. There are several ways to think about communication. For a very long time, and communication was thought of as the transmission of information, rather. So it is that, but if not only that, even though still many in fields outside of communication, for example, in public health or medicine, do think so. From a different point of view, communication is the process through which we make sense of the world around us. You might even say that's the process through which we make the world. In other words, it is constitutive of reality. It is through communication that we come to understand what health means and what health is, what healthy eating looks like, what behaviors help us stay healthier, and what are the things that hold us back? What are the barriers to adopting healthier behaviors? We refer to the narratives specifically that constitute this reality. Change my slide here, apologies. In which we refer to the narratives that constitute the reality which we seek to accomplish health-related goals, including nutrition-related goals, as a field of health action. The field of health action emerges through the ongoing interaction of individuals and their social networks, and with a variety of other organizational and institutional entities, ranging, for example, from their local grocery stores and local social services to local and state departments of public health. And these narratives happen in the specific environments that they inhabit, in the US versus Greece, in New Jersey versus Crete, in a neighborhood that is a food desert versus in one that is not. Although we would need to follow our students for a bit longer, over time, the intercultural communication, the dialogue that occurred in class was not only engaging, as suggested by the length of the conversation, the number of students who participated, and the variety of topics covered, but through it, students first grew more aware of their communities and their environment's assets and deficits that made it easier for them or more difficult to eat in a healthier way. Second, students tested a modified behavior, one that was closer to the ideal Cretan diet, and thought about what they needed to replicate it at home and what might hold them back when they get back home. They learned more about the Cretan and Mediterranean diet, but also the lifestyle that supports it. For example, the importance of primary and secondary social ties, establishing rituals like sitting down in company to eat together at least once a day. But they also applied key theoretical concepts and terms and models, such as the sociological model of health and the notion of social determinants of health, to understand nutrition behavior and examine where interventions might be necessary to address related disparities and inequities. So in conclusion, communication is an important the social determinant of health in its own right, whether you consider it through a transmission model or through a lens that emphasizes communication as constitutive of reality. Arguably, the latter is more useful, as it allows us to identify multiple points of intervention to modify individuals, communities, and populations' health behavior and lifestyle. And from an educational intervention standpoint, intercultural communication, as illustrated in the summer program example that I shared with you, facilitates understanding of what and how we may need to change as individuals, as communities, as societies, and as cultures in order to improve our health. Thank you for your kind attention, and I look forward to talking with you further, hopefully, in our Q&A session. Take care.
Thank you very much indeed, Matthew, and we look forward to developing that in the Q&A at the end. I love the idea that communication is not just a transfer of information, but what comes next is the important bit. Now, our technological wizards in Athens have got things sorted, and Dr. Elias Gurgouris is now available. So over to you, Elias.
Hi, my name is Dr. Ilia Grigoris, and I'm a happiness and organizational wellness expert. I have the opportunity and feel very fortunate indeed to travel the world and speak about happiness and corporate wellness. And I've been invited by this amazing new organization, the Mediterranean Lifestyle Medicine Institute, to share some thoughts with you about. I'm Greek, of course, so obviously the Mediterranean is very close to me, even though I left since I was a kid, but try to follow, this beautiful tradition and this beautiful part of the world that has given us so much in terms of philosophy and democracy and all the wonderful things the ancient Greeks gave us. But to me, the most important thing by far is what the great Greek philosopher Aristotle said, which was that happiness is the whole purpose and meaning of life, the whole aim and end of human existence. Think, wow, what a statement. And I feel like Aristotle truly captured what this life really, in the end, is all about. As I get an opportunity to share thoughts on happiness and wellness when I travel and I speak at universities and organizations, I always, regardless of the country, by the way, I always ask the following question to the audience, which is this. If you were to ask any parent, regardless of ethnicity, religious affiliation, socioeconomic status, nationality, gender, and so on, what would you like for your children? What is the answer to that question? And universally, I usually take the mic and I point towards the audience. I just want them to be, and of course they yell, happy, right? So just like Aristotle said, and just like most of us, that for the people that we love and we care about, what is the one thing that we wish for them? It's just to be happy. And obviously the last 2 or 3 years, this world has taken a beating. It's been hard with the pandemic. We have a multitude of crises. Of course, the mental health crisis that's raging with depression, anxiety, and stress at all-time highs across the globe, with billions of people struggling. A lot of them, mind you, didn't have a pre-existing condition. The economic hardships that people are facing, the geopolitical stuff with, a war, here in Europe that we never thought we would see on this continent again. And that's not even taking into account people's personal struggles, going through a separation or a divorce or a challenging time in their relationship, or maybe having to deal with a sick child, or having to take care of an elderly parent that struggles with dementia or Alzheimer's. So, and this is part of human life, right? I say that we're all graduates from the University of Adversity, meaning that the longer we live on this earth, the higher is the degree of adversity and difficulty that we will face. So then the question, of course, becomes, can we be happy in the middle of adversity? And as you know, it's easy to be grateful when everything is going well. I think that's one of the easiest things in the world. I mean, the gratitude list is truly endless. And we also know that you cannot be in a state of gratitude and depression at the same time physiologically. That's impossible. So can we be grateful in adversity? Absolutely, yes. But there are certain things, and I believe that happiness is a choice, by the way. Having said that, it's also a skill set, meaning that if we do certain things consistently on a daily or weekly basis, that we will definitely find happiness and wellness and peace and love in our hearts. But it does take some work. For some people, it might come a little bit easier than others. But just for me, the Mediterranean philosophy, which is just live your best life. And the last couple of years, like I said, have been so hard. And people have said, Dr. Ilia, what is your biggest takeaway from what's happened? Which is this. My biggest takeaway is do not procrastinate your happiness. Most of us are like, well, when, ... when I'm in the right, when I get married, when I have kids, when the kids grow up, when I retire, when I get a raise, when I'm in the right relationship, when I have enough money in the bank, like all these whens, when I get to travel, right? Forget about all the whens. Life is too short. There are no guarantees that any one of us is going to be here next week or tomorrow even, in some ways. And that's very freeing. So living our best life now, I think it isn't just a good idea or a nice to have, it's an absolute necessity. I also believe that one of the happiest version of ourselves is walking around on this planet, on this earth, there's a sphere of influence that we have, and we can share that light, the lightheartedness, the laughter. Sense of humor is important. But happy people tend to know what their purpose in life is. That's a big part. They tend to be flexible and adaptable. In other words, they're not so stuck in their ways where it has to be a certain way. They plan, they prepare, they take action, because in the end, as you know, it's not what we know in life that matters, it's what we do with what we know. That's what really matters. It's in the taking action. And I know we have plenty of time to discuss other things, but the things that are most dear to my heart are to live our best life, to love deeply, feel into our heart, get out of our head. I know that's hard. It's the distance between the brain and the heart sometimes is the longest distance in the universe. Be open-minded. Practice self-forgiveness. So difficult and so necessary. And of course, self-care. How well do we take care of ourselves physically, emotionally, mentally, and spiritually? And all of those things are, I think, encompassed in this Mediterranean lifestyle. We want to export that to the rest of the world. And we're very open to feedback, of course, and suggestions. And we look forward to a great webinar. And just make happiness your priority. We want that for our kids. We want that for our grandkids. We really should also want that for ourselves. And seeking that and having those moments in life that move you deeply. And then sharing them with our loved ones, of course, right? And practicing kindness and acts of service. You bring all that together, and we can really have a great life. This is a wonderful organization. I'm just so grateful to be part of it. And remember, do not procrastinate your happiness. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Elia. I think that the link between pursuit of happiness and the purpose in life is well made, and it's something that we all strive for, isn't it? And we look forward to seeing you again a little later. We're now going to, can I just remind you before moving on that you should have questions brimming in your minds at the moment, and please put them down into the post so that we can pick them up in the Q&A at the end. Now I'd like to turn to Audrey Tierney, who's a PhD. She's an Associate Professor of Nutrition and Dietetics at Limerick University in Ireland. And she has a special interest in implementation science. And her topic is translating Mediterranean diet and lifestyle principles in non-Mediterranean populations. Thank you very much, Audrey.
Hi, everybody. My name is Audrey Tierney, and I'm an Associate Professor in Nutrition and Dietetics, and of late an Implementation Science Researcher here at the University of Limerick, which is in the Midwest of Ireland. So a lot of my research to date has focused on the effects of the Mediterranean diet, mainly in chronic diseases that have an underlying inflammatory basis. But more recently, I'm quite interested in looking at how to implement the evidence base around the Mediterranean diet in clinical and non-clinical practices. All of my research has been conducted outside of the Mediterranean region. So I'm delighted to be talking to you today about ways and means of translating the Mediterranean diet and its lifestyle principles into non-Mediterranean populations. So we know that epidemiological and clinical investigations has proved time and time again the evaluation and the undisputed effects of the Mediterranean diet with regards to health, aging, longevity, disease prevention, management, and mortality. And it's nice to see that year on year, there's a growing number of studies that are applying the principles of the Mediterranean diet outside of the Mediterranean regions. And the associations of the adherence to the Mediterranean diet with different health outcomes have been evaluated in diverse non-Mediterranean contexts. We can see from this table here the many references from outside the Mediterranean region with regards to the impact and effects of the Mediterranean diet on mortality, cancer, COPD, fragility fractures, to name a few. And we're all aware of well-cited systematic reviews or meta-analysis or umbrella reviews that look at the effects of the impact of the Mediterranean diet. And these include studies outside of the Mediterranean region also. Mediterranean diet or Mediterranean-like diets have also been recommended in national guidelines, such as the 2015 to the 2020 Dietary Guidelines for Americans, the American Heart Association Guidelines for the Prevention of Stroke and Transient Ischemic Attack, the American Heart Association Guidelines on the Primary Prevention of Cardiovascular Disease, and also incorporating the Mediterranean diet into healthy eating guidelines. For example, in Australia, the Healthy Eating Pyramid incorporates principles of the Mediterranean diet. So herbs and spices are included, legumes are in the Eat Most section, a predominance of fruit and vegetables is supported, and olive oil also has a place in the pyramid. I moved back from Australia, where I spent 10 years working there, back to Ireland in 2017. And when I came back, I wrote a paper on how I think we should and could perhaps incorporate the most recent evidence base of the Mediterranean diet into our own dietary guidelines here in Ireland, and proposed the Med-ERA diet. So ERA is the Irish word for Ireland, and I'm hoping that'll catch on. However, translating the Mediterranean diet and its adherence-associated benefits into non-Mediterranean countries is challenging, particularly because there's many definitions of the Mediterranean diet. Looking at the literature, there's lots of methods used to measure adherence to the dietary patterns. So there's many tools and scores. And the study designs and the involved populations are all heterogeneous. But in addition, there are several misconceptions and difficulties when you try to interpret the recommendations or when you try to extrapolate the key principles of the Mediterranean diet into other contexts. And context is really important. Looking at the availability of key foods, their type, the variety, and how they're prepared influences how you evaluate the effectiveness of a diet. You don't want to go too far away from the original or from the evidence base. A relevant barrier that does need to be considered is the fact that olive oil, which we know is a cornerstone of the Mediterranean diet, is not widely used as a main source of fat outside of the Mediterranean region. MUFA content of olive oil is considered to be one of its beneficial components. And for this reason, the monounsaturated to saturated fat ratio is often used as an indicator of adherence to the Mediterranean diet in non-Mediterranean countries. But we know that this can reflect the intake of animal fats in populations who don't usually consume olive oil. We know the beneficial effects of red wine intake, particularly in Mediterranean diet regions and in low quantities. But we often see in literature that you can't discriminate from other forms of alcohol or even discriminate from, larger quantities being consumed. However, these difficulties and limitations, they don't completely prevent the extrapolation of the benefits of the Mediterranean in other contexts. We just need to be mindful and look at adapting local characteristics, not only of diet, but of other lifestyle, Mediterranean lifestyle factors, like and looking at culture and traditions. And I think qualitative studies are key here to understanding the enablers and barriers of populations being studied and looking at uptake of the Mediterranean diet. We need to be cautious around some prevalent myths on the Mediterranean diet that require clarification if we want optimal transferability to some non-Mediterranean countries. So, for example, it's not purely a vegetarian diet. It is primarily, but not exclusively, as we know, a plant-based diet that allows for low consumption of red meat, fermented dairy, and a moderate consumption of fish. You'd be surprised when you mention Mediterranean diet, people think, pizza, pasta, free for all with regards to alcohol. It's not all about the avocado, and actually this is a fruit originating from South America. It's not traditionally a Mediterranean diet food. And the use of, using other unsaturated fat cooking oils like flaxseed or peanut or corn or sunflower oil, or even oils that are rich in polyunsaturated fat. But ultimately, the proper introduction of the traditional Mediterranean diet in non-Mediterranean countries really requires the use of olive oil as the main culinary fat. But myths and misconceptions aside, we do need to be cognizant of the practicalities of embedding the principles of the Mediterranean diet into non-Mediterranean countries, such as Ireland, where familiarity is quite low. And in the States, they tested the translation of the Mediterranean diet, and they proposed an alternative healthy Mediterranean style eating pattern to be aware of local dietary practices and foods that don't necessarily have a negative health effect, so that could be consumed alongside a Mediterranean diet. So, for example, it's not an integral component of the Mediterranean diet, but the dietary guidelines for Americans in 2015 to 2020 don't impose restrictions on egg consumption because dietary cholesterol is not considered a concern. So this acknowledgement of incorporating aspects of local dietary practices may lead to better adoption and adherence to the new promoted guidelines, which ultimately will lead to significant changes in health, we hope. And I've included a picture there of potatoes, which is something that we're looking at here in Ireland, looking at the, similarly what they did with eggs, consuming potatoes alongside key principles of the Mediterranean diet. So what do the qualitative studies tell us in this area? So we conducted this study in Australia where we randomly assigned people who had non-alcoholic fatty liver disease to either a Mediterranean diet or a low-fat diet. So it was a hybrid study design. We wanted to test the effectiveness of the diet with respect to insulin resistance and fatty liver, but also looking at what implementation strategies would be required to increase uptake or implementation of the diet. So the participants reported that they enjoyed taking part in the Mediterranean diet, they had positive health benefits, and the themes that emerged were novelty, convenience, and the ability to swap foods or meals, that being key enablers for the successful implementation of the diet. Flavour and enjoyment of food were fundamental to adherence and to sustaining or maintaining changes beyond the dietary intervention. I did another study in Ireland, similar type study looking at the effects of a Mediterranean versus our own Irish healthy eating guidelines in people who had rheumatoid arthritis. So that's another condition with underlying inflammation. Again, a hybrid design looking at the effectiveness, but also the barriers and enablers to following a Mediterranean diet in Ireland. So similar barriers emerged, so difficulty adapting to the eating pattern, limited knowledge of the diet, perception around expense, availability of foods, the expectation of the time commitment to the diet. And what came out from the Irish cohort, which didn't come out from the Australian cohort, was that climate was a barrier to uptake. Key enablers then were similar across the literature, advertisement, promotion of the diet, accessibility, affordability, and again, prior knowledge or the need for education. So it seems for optimal uptake of the Mediterranean diet in non-Mediterranean population, the diet needs to have notable health properties and be nutritionally adequate, be palatable, and have potential for sustainability. And that's sustainability beyond the environment. In Australia, the Mediterranean Research Group that I was part of, led by Catherine Itsiopoulos, looked at employing a accretion-based Mediterranean diet into many of our dietary interventions. And a couple of our PhD students wrote this nice paper on how to translate the traditional Mediterranean diet into multicultural settings. So they devised meal plans. They developed a food pyramid that could be used outside of Mediterranean regions, and quick and easy methods and no cooking meal options to make the diet more accessible to populations with a low familiarity. I think, from the qualitative and quantitative studies, we need to get our policymakers involved, taking note of the practical strategies that will, lead to better implementation of the Mediterranean diet in these non-Mediterranean regions. We need to look at implementation strategies that work in terms of the uptake, and again, looking at implementation outcomes such as adoption, acceptability, feasibility. And I think this is key in order to translate, especially into dietary and clinical guidelines. So I'd like to thank you for your time today, and I look forward to taking some questions after the presentations at the panel discussion.
Thank you very much, Audrey, and we look forward to catching up with you shortly in the Q&A. I hope you're there in Ireland and you're going to be joining us. Interesting idea about fake news. Who knew? Who knew? And flavor and enjoyment for food. Wow. Yeah. These are important characteristics, aren't they? So thank you very much, Audrey. We'll get back to you soon. Now, I'd like to introduce now Beth Fretis, who's President-elect of the American College of Lifestyle Medicine. And she's Director of Lifestyle Medicine and Wellness at the Massachusetts General Hospital. And she'll be talking about the key principles of behavior change. So welcome, Beth.
Welcome. I'm Dr. Beth Fretis, President-elect of the American College of Lifestyle Medicine and Clinical Assistant Professor at Harvard Medical School. I'm delighted to be here today to share some information on behavior change. I'm going to share my screen with you. We're going to get right into the material together. Behavior change basics. We are going to define what it means to change, learn the coach approach mnemonic, and understand the 5-step cycle for collaboration. To change means to make different in some particular, to alter, to make radically different, to transform, to give a different position, course, or direction to. And all of this takes time, especially transformation. During your visits for behavior change with patients who have chronic conditions, you're going to need to be patient and take the time to understand them, to collaborate with them, and that's the key. So let's look at the coach approach. I have been in this area of health and wellness coaching since 2008. When I was certified as a health and wellness coach, I've taken 5 different trainings by now over the past, what has this been? 14 years. Oh my. Let me share with you what I've learned. The key is to adopt this way of being called the coach approach. So when we come into the room, we're curious, we're open, non-judgmental, we're appreciative, we're compassionate, and we're honest. For appreciation, we're appreciating whatever steps this patient has made in the past, presently, or what they're planning to do in the future towards change. We're going to appreciate it because what we appreciate appreciates. And clearly we need compassion. We also need self-compassion these days. We need to express compassion to patients that are often struggling and have been struggling for years. And then, of course, we approach all interactions with honesty. Now we're going to jump into the 5-step cycle, which is the doing of coaching. First, we need to prepare, take our own deep breaths, get mindful into the present moment, and make sure to turn off that phone and to focus solely on the patient, not the to-do list, not the research project, not the paper or video you have to make, but instead the patient who's in front of you. This will take taking care of yourself, prioritizing your own self-care so you can be fully there and present when you are coaching. I'm going to start with empathy, align motivation, the patient's motivation, build confidence, set SMART goals, and then set accountability. It's really important to focus in on the empathy. We often refuse to accept an idea merely because the tone of voice in which it has been expressed is unsympathetic to us. Friedrich Nietzsche. Research has shown that when we are expressing empathy, patients are more satisfied with the care. And that's important because when patients are satisfied, they're more likely to feel a connection with the healthcare provider, to want to come back, and thus be engaged in their healthcare, in their behavior change process. The next step after we express that empathy is to move on to aligning motivation. We do this through MI, motivational interviewing, which is a collaborative, goal-oriented style of communication with particular attention to the language of change. It's designed to strengthen personal motivation for and commitment to a specific goal by eliciting and exploring the person's own reasons for change within an atmosphere of acceptance and compassion. I'm going to emphasize the person's own reasons for change. We as healthcare providers know why people need to start exercising, eat their vegetables, try to lose weight. We know why, but we want to understand what's their motivation for being in the room with us, the Zoom room or the real room, the live room, and why are they interested in change in this moment? Then we need to build their strength. Find your strength. This is a strengths-based approach coaching. One simple question, open-ended. What are your strengths? Just ask the patient. If they are uncomfortable and can't answer, think about a time when you were at your best. Tell me about it. And you can identify strengths that they used. Or you can try another question. When did you achieve a goal you were striving for? What strengths did you use? How can you apply those strengths now? Once the patient has aligned their motivation and you've built some confidence, you're moving on to setting SMART goals, specific, measurable, action-oriented, realistic, and time-sensitive. Many people come to me and they say, I want to lose 20 pounds. That's not a SMART goal. It is specific, it is measurable, but it's not action-oriented. I don't know if it's realistic because I don't know the time frame. So we need to make sure there's action to this. So I ask them, what are you planning to do? Maybe they say, get back into my running or my swimming. Include more vegetables and more healthy options, less processed food into my dietary pattern. Maybe they say, I really need to focus in on my sleep or my stress, and that stress eating has got to go. At any rate, we need the goal to be specific, measurable, action-oriented, realistic, and time-sensitive. Then, last step, accountability. Checking in with the patient, have follow-up. They may need to use the buddy system. Find someone that they can work with to keep them accountable. Tracking systems are very useful. And if they collaborate with a caregiver, spouse, loved one, friend, maybe that person wants to make change too, and they can help each other by holding each other accountable. Ultimately, the patient needs to be accountable for these behaviors and take responsibility. You've probably seen the founder of modern management, Peter Drucker. What gets measured gets managed. Depending on their goal, you're going to use a variety of different techniques for measuring how they're doing, making progress toward their goal. Journaling, logging, pedometer, heart rate monitor, scale, blood tests, time mile, number of fruits and vegetables, number of push-ups, hours spent sleeping, wearable devices for tracking. We have a lot of options, and creativity is a key piece of coaching. So the 5-step cycle for coaching with patients involves collaborating. First, we have to prepare deep breaths, mindfulness, self-care, empathy, align motivation, build confidence, set SMART goals, set accountability. And the goal for us is the person feels understood, motivated, supported, engaged, and that they have hope. Underlying all this, we're curious, open, appreciative, compassionate, and honest. And that's the heart and soul of coaching and behavior change. It is a journey, and thank you so much for letting me be part of your learning journey.
Good one.
Hello, Catherine Itsiopoulos here. I'm going to be coordinating the Q&A session, and I have a panel with me. But firstly, I'd like to thank you, Beth, for sharing with us the 5-step model to coaching, most important techniques to use for implementing all of the information that we've heard about Mediterranean lifestyle medicine. So what a session it's been. We've had 12 speakers. We've covered all of the pillars of lifestyle medicine, beginning with stress, sleep, social relationships, avoiding harmful substances, physical activity, and healthy eating, the Mediterranean way. And we know that dieta doesn't just mean food, it means the way of eating. So what we'll do now is go to your questions, and thank you for sharing your questions with us. And I'll begin firstly with the first question, which is from the audience. Can we say that the Mediterranean diet is a sustainable one for people living far away from the Mediterranean Sea? Now, Audrey Tierney, I heard you talking about sustainability, so I might shoot to you for that, for answering that question. Thank you.
I just stepped out there when the question was being asked again, and came back in at the last minute. So can a Mediterranean diet be sustainable when you live far away from the Mediterranean Sea? Is that the question, Kat?
That's the question. Thank you, Audrey.
Yes. Well, what we found in our studies, both in Australia with Catherine on primarily looking at the effect of the Mediterranean diet on various diseases, chronic diseases, but of late we have looked at, qualitative research to see if, what people find difficult about adhering to a Mediterranean diet, what they found easy. And we've seen this in other studies as well, that the key principles of the Mediterranean diet can be adhered to outside of the Mediterranean region. And it comes down to things like accessibility, cost, and knowledge and experience of the diet. So I think once those key factors are, to the fore, that you have knowledge of what the Mediterranean diet is and its key principles, that you can access the key staple foods and integrate them into your diet, and that they're not at a costly price, and that they're easily or somewhat accessible, then yes, you can. And we've found that even in Ireland, that people, once they can access the main foods, know where to go, which in this day and age, they're absolutely available. Things like extra virgin olive oil, like nuts, like legumes, lots of recipes out there, lots of Mediterranean type cookbooks. So it is absolutely a diet that you can integrate into your diet. You can follow, even if you don't live in and around the Mediterranean region.
Thank you for that really practical advice, Audrey, and we love the work you're doing in Ireland. The next question comes from Dr. Christodoulou, who has shared with us some very interesting findings from work that he's done on the association with sleep, between sleep and the Mediterranean diet. And the question is, would you think a stable sleep routine would probably be a more representing sleep pattern for the Mediterranean lifestyle today? Professor Crusoe, I might ask you that question.
I would like to try to answer. I would say that once we get 7 to 8 hours of sleep in a day, and we start and end approximately the same time every day, in other words, have some regularity at the onset and the end of sleep, I think we'll be fine. The good thing about Mediterranean diet is that it's very light. So you can eat, and after a reasonable time, you can go to bed and sleep.
Great. Thank you for that. And I was reflecting on your talk when you said a heavy meal interrupts your sleep. So
it will interrupt sleep, and that's why it's best not to go to bed until you have digested your food, which means a few hours.
A few hours.
Yes.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. The next question I think will be for you, Matthew Matsaganis, about communication. I was fascinated with your presentation on communication. It's more than just transmission. It's about how do you get the message across. So if you could share with the audience, with patients, what tools would we use to get the message across as it relates to a Mediterranean way of life? What are some of the quick things that we could do in practice?
Can you hear me now? Okay, so I would also want to go back to the question that was asked earlier about how sustainable it is. And so one of the things that I think is important to consider, also thinking about Audrey's presentation earlier, is accessibility is key, but then who's responsible for making things accessible? People can find things that are similar to what we can find in the Mediterranean, but let's say they're looking for tomatoes, for example. I mean, tomatoes in Greece can cost under, I forget what the price is, under €1, or in high season. Good luck trying to find tomatoes of that quality in the US for the similar price. So sometimes things that it's not just about having things access to things in your environment, is whether there's other things that figure into access. Do we need to work on policies that are going to make certain kinds of foods accessible to people that need them the most but can't afford them because they're too expensive? But going back to your question about from a communication point of view, I think one of the important takeaways from a little experiment, if you will, in Crete was that modeling behavior is very important. And so if you having the ability to see how people live this kind of life, eat this kind of diet, and being able to practice it, talk about it, figure out what works for you and how you might need to modify it to fit your everyday life, can go a long way. Beautiful brochures can help, yes, but they're not going to carry. They're not going to have the impact that practice is going to have in most cases. And that's why I think this kind of experience, intercultural communication experience is very critical for people to try something out, test their boundaries, figure out how to make things work for them in the Mediterranean. But what will they need to do when they go back home, where things may look a little bit different?
Thanks, Matthew. And I really appreciated you coming back to the access being very important in terms of the transferability of the Mediterranean diet, and your work in Crete, certainly, and the illuminating comments from your students highlighted that. But that cultural communication, really important, that we can't just assume one form of communication is going to be understood. So thank you for answering that question from the audience. Hans, I think the next one will be for you. And I did love the "you are what you eat," and we're all want to be more like a Mediterranean diet, I guess, is a takeaway from that. But the question is about free range. So if we are what we eat, do you have a comment? Someone's asked about should we be eating free range produce? What are your thoughts?
Well, it depends on where you live. Because where you live, you're provided with food, and the food between different origins is different. If you live in the Netherlands, you will eat food from chickens and cows who are being fed the most cheapest garbage on earth to have as much meat as possible. So then it's hardly possible to get products that are derived from free range because they're just not there. So I think we should have a most natural food that we can obtain, but that's not possible on every side of the earth. It may be more easily available in Greece than in the Netherlands. So that's the struggle we have in this country.
And that's realism, I guess, the challenge that we have, and the challenges we've talked about in terms of food policy and how we can improve the food supply. But even those foods you've mentioned, perhaps moderation might be another term, which we often hear about from the Mediterranean way of life. That everything in moderation, and wherever possible, to choose something that's free range, healthily, locally grown would be fantastic. So thanks for sharing that with us, Hans.
Absolutely.
Great. Okay, the next question, and I might ask you, Rob, your talk on healthy relationships, which are critically important, and you talked about festivals and lots of examples of the Mediterranean way of life and how connectedness is related to health and happiness. But I do love the term conviviality. So, and you did talk about that in your talk. So perhaps if you could share with us how we could all achieve conviviality in our different environments if we're not in the Mediterranean.
Probably quite difficult. I come from the United Kingdom and the northern part of the United Kingdom. We do have very short days during the winter and very long days in the summer. One of the strange things really is that because of the coronavirus, that mindsets have changed a bit. We never used to see in our part of the world people gathering together to eat outside, and children maybe spending a little bit more time outside, at least in the summer months. So curiously, maybe we are beginning to recognize that the benefits of sunlight for our children, the benefits of being active, the benefits of eating together more as a family around a table. These are this is a conviviality, if you like, which is commonplace in the Mediterranean. As for other examples, I think that healthy relationships, I think it does require obviously people to
be together, this togetherness. And there are examples in other parts of the world, and especially in the longer-lived communities, notably in Japan, of course, and the Moai. And of course, in Australia, they have the Aboriginal, the indigenous population have yarn nuts. And it's this getting together that is so important. And it's difficult to measure, isn't it? I mean, there are measures that we use, and I mentioned them in the way past. But it is a difficult measure. And people will say, oh, it's a lot easier in the Mediterranean because of the nice weather. Well, actually, there's plenty of conviviality that goes on. The problem slightly is the alcohol, the link to alcohol, that some people feel that they have to drink alcohol to be convivial. But the lesson from the Mediterranean is clearly to moderate and eat it hot and drink while you're eating your meal. So yeah, we've got some mindsets to change generally, but it's one that once you've tasted conviviality, you want to keep it going.
That's it's a lovely final comment from you, Rob. And I was going to say you can have too much conviviality, and I probably meant too much of a good thing. Everything in moderation. We go back to that. But thank you for sharing with us how we can achieve conviviality in any setting. The next question, Professor Chrysos, is for you, I think, again, because you got us all thinking about the impacts of chronic stress with your talk. And someone from the audience has asked, well, how do we know we've got chronic stress? What are the telltale signs?
Well, we do know, because when we're stressed, we feel it. We have dysphoria. It's called chronic stress-induced dysphoria. And of course, it's a dysphoria that if it's chronic, you have it every day or almost every day and the entire length of the day, even in the evening when you're supposed to relax and do something else. So we have to avoid chronic stress. And to do this, we have to take time off the things that give us stress. And for most of us, stress comes from the work, but it could be from the family. It's important to take time off and allow ourselves, allow our bodies and brains to correct themselves. If there is anything negative that has happened, with time and relaxation, it's being corrected. So the answer is we have to avoid chronic stress as much as we can.
Thank you. And that's a really important message there, that if we work too hard and into the night, we will be stressed, that we really have to take time out. And that's an effort for many people, though. I think we're conditioned, are we not, to work 24/7. So perhaps, define a time where everything gets switched off.
Yes. Usually it's in the evening and in the weekends.
Yeah.
So let's try to take time off, real time off.
Fantastic. Now there's a question, and I'll go to our president, Professor Leros Island. You talked about exercise, the benefits of exercise, which are well described, well researched, but exercise is counterintuitive to humans, you said, and not sustainable when it's at high levels. So what can we do? And you gave us lots of tools in your talk, but what's the one thing that we can do to be more Mediterranean and do more subliminal exercise, I guess, physical activity, the Mediterranean way?
Thank you, Catherine. It's a great question. And again, everything comes down to, we need to find specific ways of actually doing what we are, in theory, have found that it works. We need to change it and make it practical for people, for ourselves also, to be able to follow up. First of all, let me just clarify once again that if you like going to the gym, if you have the time to go to the gym and exercise, then by all means, you should keep going to the gym. That doesn't mean the fact that I stress more the idea of being physically active throughout the day does not mean that if you like and if you have the time to go to the gym, especially if you go with friends and you are, playing together or you exercise together, by all means do that. However, if you don't have the time or if you don't want to do that, you can gain very significant health effects by just adding a little more physical activity throughout the day. So taking any opportunity that you might get to add a few steps to your daily physical activity. And you can do that really by not avoiding stress. Professor Crusos talked before about stress. I would stress that we should avoid psychological stress, but try to get as much physical stress as possible. And by that, I mean, just exercise our bodies and use every opportunity to exercise. So what are these opportunities? Instead of taking the elevator, just use the stairs. Especially when you carry your groceries back home, when you're using the stairs and you have bags in your arms, just go up the stairs and move your arms up and down. It's like you've been in the gym and doing one exercise session. So in reality, just look for every opportunity, be the person that actually always volunteers to go out and do things instead of being the person who is just waiting for others to do physical stuff for him or her. So just try to add as much physical activity as you can in your daily lives. It will be easier and more enjoyable.
Great advice. I do like your groceries, healthy groceries, lots of Mediterranean ingredients, taking them home, and make sure you cook a healthy meal and enjoy it with the whole family. There is another question that's come through. I think we've got a few more minutes. How can we realize that we have chronic inflammation? If we suffer from an acute inflammation, the body sends a signal, but in a chronic state, does it react? And I might open that to the panel to see. Yes, okay.
Well, there are specific symptoms that result from inflammation, and those are the so-called MUS, or medically unexplainable symptoms. A little bit of fatigue, some negative thoughts, some depressive thoughts, a little bit of dizziness, sleepiness during the day, or excessive excitation for no reason during the day. It's a number of symptoms, the medically unexplainable symptoms, that when they exist, we know that there is chronic inflammation. One should realize that in our body, we have programs that are important for keeping us alive. One of these programs is the stress program, and it will produce certain changes in our brain and body. And the other one is the inflammation program. And during inflammation, we have the so-called sickness syndrome manifestations. It's what happens when you get a real inflammation, due, let's say, to a bacterium, septic type of inflammation, in which case you need to stay at your bed, take it easy, wait until you get better, get some sleep. So these are important programs. Unfortunately, when we have stress and inflammation, we activate these programs. Maybe not to the extreme, but at low level. And that low level is enough to tell us that something is wrong with us. People go to the doctor, they say, I have a pain here, I have a pain there. When I wake up in the morning, I can't start my day. These are all stress and sickness syndrome manifestations.
And so resting, particularly if you have an illness, because your body needs to activate those systems for repair.
Exactly. So resting is important for people who have inflammation.
And I think Dr. Rob Lawson would like to add to that as well.
I'd just like to pick up on the medically unexplained symptoms. It's such a common thing, actually, in general practice in the UK. And I know that it causes a lot of angst. It's generally thought to be all psychological, of course. And the question then is, well, medically unexplained usually means that there's been lots of examinations, there's been lots of investigations, looked inside out, and nobody can find anything. But are they looking for the right things? And are there reference ranges from laboratories accurately reflecting what's going on
intracellular. And that's something I think we need to work on. We shouldn't be putting people through a lot of useless investigations and lots of tests. We should maybe agree around what markers there are for inflammation that actually matter, whether it's IL-6, which we don't do in the UK regularly, but CRP, for example, C-reactive protein. What are the reference ranges there, and other quintiles or whatever that we need to know about in order to get an idea from our patients whether they do have an inflammatory process. The one thing in practice that I tended to do was to introduce the principles of lifestyle medicine, irrespective of the results of the practice, because they're so unreliable. But there must be, we must give some thought to those specifics, I think, in terms of medically unexplained.
Let me just mention that they are now medically explained. They are symptoms of stress and inflammation that you don't pick up by doing a CBC,
a panel,
or a panel, a biochemical panel. Yeah, they're not picked up this way. Actually, if we use C-reactive protein, you have to use the hypersensitive one. Yeah. If we use the limit of 5, that won't pick it up.
No, that's right. Yeah, great. Thank you both. Now, this question came up because it's sometimes controversial, and that is the role of alcohol in the Mediterranean diet. Stefania, you talked about the benefits and the curves and polyphenols, but are you able to share with us your views on how you would recommend to patients, and are there certain patients where you might have more caution with alcohol? How would we incorporate alcohol in a healthy way to follow a Mediterranean way of life? What's your thoughts on that question?
So first, it is a big debate. It is a big debate, especially because YARC just classified alcohol as a carcinogen in the group 1. And last year, in 2021, YARC, the agency of WHO, just published an update on that point. And they confirmed that alcohol was the cause in 2020 of more than 700,000 deaths all around the world. And it was for 80% for more than 2 glasses of alcohol per day. But even for two glasses per day, they just focus on the point that at least 100,000 were due to the alcohol consumption. So it's absolutely not easy to say yes, you can and you must drink alcohol because of the health benefits. I should say, basically, for the abstainers, we should never tell them to drink alcohol. I had the case of a patient years ago. I gave the Mediterranean diet, and after 2 weeks, she came back and she said, "Okay, everything was okay, doctor, for the vegetables, for the fish, but what was very difficult was to introduce alcohol in that diet." No, abstainers do not have to introduce alcohol for sure. That's a first point. For the second point, it depends on the patient, of course, and it depends on their condition, their pathologies. They should not have any problem with liver, of addiction, and then maybe we can negotiate, okay, not more than 2 glasses per day, but I never tell a patient to have 2 glasses per day. I always encourage them to focus on the weekend, on the conviviality, and never day by day. But it's, of course, a negotiation, and it depends also on the place. The pattern is very important. The binge drinking is absolutely banned. Binge drinking is what exactly we should not recommend. If the patient wants to drink alcohol, it should be with food, always with food, not more than 2 glasses, let's say, per day, or 6 glasses per week, and possibly red wine. if possible. But also, the gram of alcohols are completely not useful for health. Now, what is important is the pattern and the quality of beverage. But it's a debate, and basically, we should not encourage patients to drink alcohol. Yes.
Thank you for sharing that with us, Stephanie. And I guess proceed with caution. There are some patient groups or some clinical conditions where you wouldn't recommend alcohol, particularly where the liver's involved.
Yes.
The binge drinking is out, clearly. Yes. You mentioned conviviality again, which is the term that's coming up all the time, which is fantastic. Yes. And Mediterranean way of drinking, your definition is of that you shared with us was really important, that with food, 1 to 2 glasses, weekends with people. So that's great advice. I hope that's answered the question of the audience. We've reached time. We've really enjoyed all of the questions from everybody. Hopefully we've been able to answer them. This symposium is being recorded, so you can play it again if you wish. I wanted to thank all of the speakers again. We had 12 presentations today across all of the fields of lifestyle medicine, with in the context of the Mediterranean way of life, which has been great. Thank you to our technical crew in Athens, and most importantly for all of you for joining us today, and for engaging with us and for your questions. Finally, I'd just like to say stay tuned, because next year we're launching a conference early June, and we will communicate that information to you shortly. So yeah, stay tuned for more action on the island of Leros, the Mediterranean way. Thank you very much. Bye for now.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you very much for the honor.
Thank you.
Bye. Thank you.
Bye. Thank you.
Bye bye. Bye bye.
Good evening.
Thank you.
Okay. So.
No, I'm still.